Okay, welcome to the deep dive. Today we are diving into Sun Tzu's The Art of War, one of the most important works of strategy ever written.
A timeless classic.
It is. And you know what's really cool about this? We're going to be looking specifically at Chapter 5, titled Energy. And this is a chapter that you brought to my attention.
Yes, I did. It's a chapter that always resonated with me.
And as we were talking about it, we both realized that even though this was written centuries ago, the insights in here are just as relevant now as they ever were, especially in today's world.
Absolutely. And you know what? It's not just about military strategy, is it?
Exactly. That's what's so fascinating. Sun Tzu's ideas in this chapter, they can be applied to all sorts of challenges and goals, whether you're a business leader, an athlete, an artist, or just someone trying to achieve something meaningful in their life.
Right. And you provided us with the text for this deep dive, so we're really going to get into the nuts and bolts of what Sun Tzu is saying about managing your resources, that energy effectively, creating momentum, achieving victory through various means.
Exactly. And for you, the learner, I think what we're going to do today is give you a framework for think about how you can channel your own energy, whether that's your time, your effort, your resources, and use that energy to achieve a significant impact without feeling overwhelmed or burned out.
And avoid spreading yourself too thin.
Exactly. So let's jump right into Chapter 5 of The Art of War. Sun Tzu starts by talking about managing forces of different sizes. He says, and this is a quote, "The control of a large force is the same principle as the control of a few men. It is merely a question of dividing up their numbers." Then he goes on to say, "Fighting with a large army under your command is no wise different from fighting with a small one. It is merely a question of instituting signs and signals."
Mm.
So what jumps out at you about that comparison?
Well, I think what's so interesting is that Sun Tzu is saying that scale, like the size of what you're dealing with, doesn't necessarily change the fundamentals of how you manage it.
Right.
It's about the way you break things down into manageable units and how you make sure communication is clear. Those are the bedrock of effectiveness, whether you're dealing with a small team or a huge, complex organization.
Right. So it's not about being intimidated by the size of the task, but about breaking it down into those smaller parts, those manageable units.
Hmm.
And then, as Sun Tzu says, instituting those signs and signals.
Exactly.
It's about establishing those clear lines of communication and shared understanding.
Anna.
And you know what? I think that's such a powerful insight because it can really help prevent that feeling of being overwhelmed.
Absolutely. Think about it like this. If you've got a huge project, right, a big project, the first thing you need to do is break it down into those smaller, well-defined deliverables, those manageable pieces.
Yeah.
And with each piece, you need someone who's responsible, right? Someone who's accountable for it. And then regular updates, that's part of those signs and signals so that everyone's on the same page. Those roles need to be well-defined.
Mm.
And everyone needs to be crystal clear on the objective, on what they're aiming for.
It's like having a roadmap.
Exactly, a clear roadmap.
Yeah. Now, Sun Tzu goes on to introduce these two key concepts.
Yeah.
Direct and indirect methods. He says, in all fighting, the direct method may be used for joining battle, but the indirect method will be needed in order to secure victory. And then he says something really interesting. Indirect tactics, efficiently applied, are inexhaustible as heaven and earth. What do you think he means by that?
Well, the direct method is like the straightforward approach.
The head-on approach.
Exactly. But Sun Tzu is suggesting that while you might need that direct approach to start things off, it's the indirect approach, the flanking maneuver, the less obvious strategy that actually gets you the win.
Interesting. So it's not always about brute force.
No, it's about being clever, finding those weaknesses and exploiting them. And, I think what's really important here is that the indirect approach, when you use it well, it opens up all these possibilities for achieving your goals. And often you actually end up saving energy and resources in the process.
Right. So it can actually be more efficient.
Yes, exactly. Like instead of just going in with a full-on confrontation, maybe there's a more elegant way to achieve the same outcome. Maybe you just need to step back, look at the situation from different angles, and find that more subtle, more effective path.
It's like when you're trying to persuade someone.
Oh, yeah.
If you just go in with a hard sell, you might just push them further away. But if you can find a way to connect with them, to understand their perspective, to maybe frame things in a way that aligns with their values, you might have much more success.
You got it. Sometimes not engaging directly can be the most powerful move.
It's counterintuitive.
It is,
Yeah.
but it can be incredibly effective.
Now, Sun Tzu uses some really cool analogies to explain how combining these two methods, direct and indirect, can create all this potential.
Right.
He talks about musical notes and primary colors and how you can take a limited number of these basic elements and create an almost infinite number of variations. And then he applies this to warfare. He says, in battle, there are not more than two methods of attack, the direct and the indirect. Yet these two in combination give rise to an endless series of maneuvers. And he concludes with this: the direct and the indirect lead onto each other in turn. It is like moving in a circle you never come to an end. Who can exhaust the possibilities of their combination?
That's so powerful.
It is. It's like he's talking about a dance.
It is, isn't it? A constant interplay between these two forces. It's not about choosing one or the other. It's about understanding how they work together, how they flow into each other.
Right, and how you can use one to set up the other.
Exactly. Like a direct action could create an opening for an indirect maneuver or the other way around. It keeps things dynamic and unpredictable.
I love how he says, who can exhaust the possibilities of their combination?
Mm-hmm.
It really makes you think about all the different ways you could approach a challenge.
It does. And, for you, the learner, the question is, what are those fundamental elements in your own life, in your work, in your relationships? What are your skills, your resources, your network? And how can you start playing with those elements? How can you combine them in new and unexpected ways to create new opportunities, to find those advantages that no one else sees?
That's where innovation comes from.
Absolutely. It's about thinking outside the box, looking at what you already have with fresh eyes.
Now, Sun Tzu also stresses the importance of generating momentum and being decisive. He says, the onrush of troops is like the momentum of a torrent that will even roll stones along in its course. And then he talks about decisiveness. He says, the quality of decision is like the well-timed swoop of a falcon, which enables it to strike and destroy its victim.
Wow.
I know, right? And he finishes this thought with, therefore, the good fighter will be terrible in his onset and prompt in his decision.
That's a powerful image.
It is. It's like he's saying you need to be both unstoppable and incredibly sharp.
I love that torrent analogy. It perfectly captures that sense of irresistible force. Once you build up that momentum, you can just sweep away obstacles that might have seemed impossible before. And then the falcon. It's about seizing the opportunity at just the right moment. If you hesitate, you lose that momentum, you might miss your chance.
So how do you create that kind of momentum in your own life? How do you become that decisive falcon?
Well, I think it starts with taking action, even if it's just a small step. It's about creating that sense of forward movement. And then as you start to see progress, that momentum builds.
Right, so it's about getting the ball rolling.
Exactly. And for decisiveness, I think it's about gathering enough information to make an informed choice, but then trusting your gut. Don't overthink it. Make the decision and move forward.
Now, this next part is what I find really fascinating.
Oh.
It's where Sun Tzu talks about deception and creating what he calls simulated appearances. He says, amid the turmoil and tumult of battle, there may be seeming disorder and yet no real disorder at all. Amid confusion and chaos, your array may be without head or tail, yet it will be proof against defeat.
So it's about creating a false impression.
Exactly. He's talking about strategic misdirection. And he goes on to say, simulated disorder postulates perfect discipline, simulated fear postulates courage, simulated weakness postulates strength.
Wow, so it's like a calculated performance.
It is. And what's so important here is that Sun Tzu isn't advocating for actual chaos or weakness.
Right.
It's about projecting an image that will mislead your opponent. And he actually explains how to do this. He says, hiding order beneath the cloak of disorder is simply a question of subdivision. Concealing courage under a show of timidity presupposes a fund of latent energy. Masking strength with weakness is to be affected by tactical dispositions. So it's about having that inner control, that discipline, and then using that to create the desired outward effect.
Like a magician's trick.
It is. And he takes it a step further, saying, thus one who is skillful at keeping the enemy on the move maintains deceitful appearances, according to which the enemy will act. He sacrifices something, that the enemy may snatch at it. By holding out baits, he keeps him on the march. Then, with a body of picked men, he lies in wait for him.
So it's about luring the opponent into a trap.
Exactly. It's a very sophisticated form of strategy.
It is.
And I think it has a lot of applications in our modern world. It's about being aware of how your actions are perceived and then using that awareness to your advantage.
Absolutely. Like in a negotiation, you might want to appear less interested in a deal than you actually are, right?
Right.
Because if the other side thinks you're desperate, they're going to push harder. But if you can project that sense of detachment, you might be able to get a much better outcome.
It's all about controlling the narrative.
It is. You're writing the story, and you're getting the other side to play their part.
Okay, and finally, Sun Tzu turns his attention to the concept of combined energy. He says, the clever combatant looks to the effect of combined energy and does not require too much from individuals, hence his ability to pick out the right men and utilize combined energy.
Yep.
So he's saying that it's not just about individual talent or strength, it's about bringing people together, harnessing that collective power.
It's about synergy.
Exactly. And he illustrates this with a really vivid image. He says, when he utilizes combined energy, his fighting men become, as it were, like unto rolling logs or stones. For it is the nature of a log or stone to remain stationary on level ground and to move when on a slope, if round, to go rolling down. Thus, the energy developed by good fighting men is as the momentum of a round stone rolled down a mountain thousands of feet in height.
Wow.
Right. That image of the rolling stone gathering speed and power as it goes, it's a perfect metaphor for what he's talking about.
It is, and it's a reminder that when you work together, when you align your efforts, you can achieve things that would be impossible alone.
It's about creating that slope, that shared direction, that common purpose.
Exactly.
So for you, the learner, think about the people you work with, the skills you have, the resources that are available to you. How can you start combining these elements in new ways?
Yeah.
How can you create that collective momentum, that unstoppable force that Sun Tzu is talking about?
It's a powerful question to ask yourself.
It is. So just to recap, from Sun Tzu's chapter on energy, we've covered some really important ideas. We talked about how to manage large and complex tasks by breaking them down into smaller parts, about the importance of clear communication, about using both direct and indirect strategies, about the power of combining elements in new and creative ways, about building momentum and making timely decisions, about using strategic deception to your advantage, and about the incredible potential of combined energy.
And I think if you take anything away from this deep dive, it should be that invitation to think about those fundamental elements in your own life and work. What are your 5 colors? Your basic building blocks? And what would happen if you combine them in ways you've never tried before? That's where the real breakthroughs are waiting to be discovered.
Thanks for joining us for another deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time.
See you then.